Welcome into the RotoWire Sports Gambling Podcast, presented, as always, by BetMGM. If you're betting on the NFL at any point this weekend, whether it's on Sunday, whether it's on Monday, make sure you're doing so at BetMGM.com. You can do it on the BetMGM app. And you got to use our promo code BETROTO. That's BETROTO, all one word, BETROTO. Nick Whalen here with John McKechnie. Yet again, we got a fun week 4 coming up. John, for those of you who are watching along with us on YouTube, I see what's going on with the chain here.
Oh shoot, I forgot to put that away, but you know what? It's out. The chain's out. I became a chain guy sometime in August. It was a wedding party gift a friend of mine bestowed onto the squad. Real Atlanta stuff. Huge Braves fan, so pretty much the entire roster, other than like Matt Olson, is a cool guy that wears a chain. Mm-hmm. So I think that he was trying to reflect that energy. So therefore, I've been a chain guy for a little bit. It's kind of a taking a walk on the wild side for me. I'm usually a pretty vanilla individual, in the classic sense, and also just my paleness. It adds up. But I feel like the chain gives me a little bit of swagger to me.
It absolutely does, and I feel bad for our audio only listeners who aren't able to get an image of this. Maybe we'll have to take a screenshot. Know. Yeah, I mean, we'll try to give like the most vivid description possible. But that's a heck of a chain, Jonathan, and hopefully it brings you some luck here in week 4. But first, as always, we got to take a look back at week 3. I went 8-7-1 ATS. It felt a lot worse, I'll tell you that. It was one of those weeks where, I almost didn't want to go back and look at my picks, and I came out feeling all right. My head held a little bit higher than I expected it to be after another really, really difficult week in the NFL. And, I was talking to our former colleague, Chris Liss, on the XM show last night. And, I kind of asked him, like, is this the hardest it's ever been to handicap games? And his case was, well, it's never really hard. Every year, every game should be about the same every week. It's always 50-50 based on the spread. And he's totally right about that. But what I was getting at more is the amount of parity that we have in the league right now it's not unprecedented, but it feels unprecedented, especially compared to recent years where we've had so many great quarterbacks kind of lead these juggernaut teams. I mean, we have 2 undefeated teams right now through 3 weeks. Typically, I went back and looked. Typically, there's like 5 to 7 undefeateds in most years. 2 undefeated teams, and it feels like through these first couple weeks, we have a lot of good team versus good team and bad team versus bad team matchups. Like whether you're talking handicapping or just straight up picks, not even factoring in the spread, I feel like we have more 50-50 games than ever.
Yeah, it's been really tough. We actually ended up with the same record against the spread then, and I was feeling really good about San Francisco, despite how gross that game was. But they weren't pulling away by far enough, and you know what? It caught up to them in the end, and they ended up squandering that one Sunday night in Denver. My read on totals thus far has been way off. It's not been good. I think I got 4 totals correct from my picks column a week ago. So get back in the lab trying to figure that out. I know that just generally, I think unders have been hitting at around 63%. Yes, so that makes me wonder for this week and beyond, if the secret is essentially out that, unders have been the way to go, that, these totals, and we see it reflected in the totals this week. There's a lot of pretty low ones overall. So I wonder if we see, kind of a market correction where actually going over this week is kind of the way to go. But, is that chasing? Is the offense going to remain stagnant across the league? We'll have to see. But that's definitely something that I'm really trying to keep an eye on for this week.
Yeah, I actually had a good note on that I think it was Mark Sessler on the Around the NFL pod mentioned that 23 games through 3 weeks have gone under 40 total combined points. That's the most in like 2 decades. I mean, what are we talking? Like 7 to 8 games per week going under 40 points total. I mean, that's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, that's usually the lowest totals on the board. You'll see, like, for example, we have Bears Giants this week is at 39.5. So unders have been hitting like crazy. And we touched on this a little bit last week, but if you just look at the basics, most points scored through the first 3 weeks, these are among the bottom 10 scoring teams in the league. Indianapolis, Denver, Dallas, San Francisco, Green Bay, New Orleans, Tampa Bay. I mean, these are teams that are typically, at middle to upper when it comes to total points in the league. I mean, Tampa Bay has like 3 touchdowns through 3 weeks. Denver has 3 touchdowns through 3 weeks. Green Bay is winning ugly, kind of as we expected. But, it's not like it's the Jets and the Bears and the Giants weighing everything down. It's a lot of these really good quarterbacks and quote unquote really good offenses that just haven't met expectations yet.
Yeah, so that does make me wonder what, with the list that you provided there, I think that things are going to get back to normal sooner rather than later. Maybe not to the extent that we expect the Bucs to be hanging 40 on everyone every single week, but they have had to grind things out these last couple of weeks with all the injuries, the Mike Evans suspension, all that. If they're getting some guys back this week, I think that'll be a good litmus test. Them going up against the Chiefs. That's a really fun Sunday night matchup, at least on paper. It feels like that this week we got the national TV games a little bit better than the shape that we were in for those standalones a week ago. So looking forward to that. But yeah, I think that, with all of that being considered, we're going to start to see these offenses wake up here pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking Buccaneers Chiefs a little bit later. We now know that game will be played in Tampa, which kind of changes my tune, I think, as far as how I think that game might play out. But again, we'll address that later. Give me your best and worst calls from week 3.
So let's see. My best call, I thought, was being in on Miami. I was pretty unflinching on that from the time that the line dropped or came out, and throughout the week, anywhere between 5.5 points Miami was getting. I just felt like Miami was going to be able to go in there toe to toe. The game unfolded in a different way than I expected. I thought it'd be much higher scoring. These teams just couldn't really get out of their way on offense, but point stands. Like Miami was still able to get it done there, and then the Rams, they made it a little bit more interesting than I would have cared for them to, with the Cardinals kind of hanging around by 1 score late in that game. But, Cliff kicks that field goal to kind of prolong their slow march to a loss there for the Cardinals. But, the Rams were able to hang on. My worst, obviously, going with the San Francisco 49ers as my best bet. Especially I listened back to the pod, and I mentioned the Panthers being my the doorknob lock, and then the Niners being the deadbolt, and as far as locks of the week. And I should have reversed that order. I should have just stuck to my guns there and stuck with the Panthers. So oof. And then, like I mentioned, my read on totals, not so great. And then the Raiders, that's one where from like the first kind of check in, I knew that I was in trouble for that one. Them going against Tennessee. That my thinking on Tennessee was, Vrabel's a good coach. These teams aren't really like demonstrably better or worse than the others. So the coaching edge is obviously with Tennessee, and they're the home team. I should have stuck with that, but I trusted the Raiders to wake up. Did not happen. Big whiff.
The Raiders, man, they're 0-3. I think only one 0-3 team in the last 15 or 20 years. The Texans a few years ago have made the playoffs. So we'll get into the Raiders a little bit later, but things are looking pretty dire. They get the Denver Broncos at home this week. I feel like now the Raiders are in the position that the Titans were last week, where everything is telling me to jump off the Raiders. They're not a good team. Derek Carr is not good. They can't convert in the red zone. They're just sloppy. The defense is allowing these long drives every single game. But I'm terrified that the week that I jump off the Raiders is the week that they're finally going to come through. So I hate to say it, but I think I'm leaning the Raiders. I think they're -2.5 right now at BetMGM. That's the way I'm looking as of right now. We'll see what happens, with Hunter Renfrow and his status. I think that was actually a bigger loss than a lot of people realized. My best call last week had to be Carolina over New Orleans. I didn't feel great about it, but it was a bet that I ended up making, and it wasn't because Carolina played well. Other than that long Laviska Shenault touchdown, this was a really, really ugly game. I continue to be completely unconvinced that Baker Mayfield is really any better than what Sam Darnold was giving Carolina for most of last season. I think that experiment has been pretty ugly thus far, and we'll find out. I mean, Arizona, Carolina in the late window this week that's a rough one. That to me might be the most difficult game to handicap all week, but we'll talk about that one later as well. My worst call outside of the Raiders, completely dismissing the Jaguars for the second week in a row.
Oh man.
I couldn't get that Commanders loss in week 1 out of my head. In my picks column for the site, I wrote up 2 separate picks. If Justin Herbert plays, if he doesn't play, and with Herbert playing, I had the Jags losing, I think by like 13 or 14 points. That was never close. I mean, the Jags owned the Chargers from start to finish in that game. And yeah, I know maybe Herbert wasn't 100%, and you don't have Keenan Allen, and Rashawn Slater goes out, Bosa goes out. I get all that, but the Jags won that game by 4 touchdowns, man. And I was just completely ready to pick against the Jags every single week and, pocket my usual winnings off of that, as I've been doing for the last, for 14 of the last 15 years. And it's just breaking my brain. Like, I was not prepared to have to consider the possibility that the Jaguars might be a good football team.
No, I wasn't. It wasn't going to be this year. Like I figured that maybe there would be some like signs later in the year that, that this is coming together, all the talent that they've kind of stockpiled, getting some experience, hey, maybe, they become a trendy team going into next season. But oh man, no, it looks like your Jags are for real. And like you said, it's going to break your brain all season. Like how much do you trust it versus, your years and years and years of evidence to the contrary when it comes to the Jaguars being a good team. So we'll see here. But I just think that, when you have a guy like Trevor Lawrence who is going to continue to improve and prove himself to be the real deal, when you have quarterback figured out, it takes care of a lot of your other problems. And I think that Jacksonville's close to having that, pretty sewn up.
Yeah. I mean, top 5 in DVOA right now. I was not prepared for this. I really wasn't. It's completely taken me by storm, and we'll see what happens against Philly this week. I think that'll go a long way toward either. I mean, if they win that game on the road, we might not have a show next week. I might just be following the Jaguars around for the rest of the season. So like I mentioned, scoring's way down. It's kind of throwing everybody off. It doesn't feel like we have a lot of teams that you can depend on week to week, whether you're talking spreads or even straight up picks. And we have a ton of 2-1 and 1-2 teams, like almost the entire league, essentially, other than we have 1-0-3 team. We got 1-1-1 team, I believe, in the Colts. The Texans are 1-1-1 or 0-2-1.
0-2-1.
Yeah. I just too much to calculate.
Too many numbers, way too many.
The point is, the vast majority of the league is either 2-1 or 1-2. And, you asked me earlier this week, let's rank the 2-1 teams because there's so many of them, and somewhere on one end of the spectrum, somewhere on the other. Give me your top 5 teams right now that are 2-1, and I'll list them off quickly to give some context. Buffalo, Baltimore, Cleveland, Jacksonville, Denver, Kansas City, Dallas, the Giants, Green Bay, Minnesota, Chicago, Tampa Bay, and the LA Rams.
So it's funny that there are like tiers within this group of 2-1s. I think Buffalo kind of stands alone at the top. And then Kansas City, I think, is in a tier of its own as well. And then you move it. I could really go either way when it comes to Green Bay, Baltimore, and Tampa Bay. That's how I have them ranked. But I think that, by virtue of Green Bay beating Tampa Bay, you got to have Green Bay ahead of Tampa. Baltimore, I'm always kind of a tricky source on that because I've been pessimistic about them. I was pessimistic about them on the show last week. And, that I just am starting to kind of have to come to grips with the idea that, at the very least, Lamar Jackson could be playing at close to the level that we saw back in 2019. But I think unlike the 2019 team, there's a lot of flaws elsewhere on this team. So he kind of has to go Superman to figure the rest of it out. Tampa Bay, it's an older collection. It's an older bunch. And I've been kind of turned off by the way their offenses look to start the year. But, as I alluded to, as they get these guys back, as they get healthier, they're going to start to click. But, Jacksonville is really interesting at this point. If Dallas can continue to weather the storm without Dak Prescott, I think that, if anything, these last couple of weeks have shown the amount of talent on this team outside of quarterback, especially in the front 7. So Dallas is one that I'd keep an eye on. Minnesota, where have they gone? They were kind of like, everyone was like, whoa, look out, after week 1. And then just a couple of they get beat badly by Philly. That happens, of course. And then just kind of have to pull one out against Detroit this past week. So I don't know who the Vikings are. They don't know who they are, and that's going to be a weird little game there Sunday morning against the Saints out in London.
Yes, I'm still in on Minnesota, and at least for this week, I don't think New Orleans is the side in that one to give you a preview of what might very well be my best bet later in the pod. I mean, Jameis didn't practice again on Thursday. I think there's a reasonable chance that we end up seeing some Andy Dalton in this game, whether he starts it or comes on in relief. I mean, pretty much every receiver not named Chris Olave is banged up for the Saints. Kamara's banged up. I don't trust their coaching staff anymore. I mean, they've looked like one of the 5 worst offenses in the league so far. It doesn't really look anything like the Saints offenses that we remember from years past, despite having a pretty nice collection of skill player talent. So I'm pretty down on the Saints, and I think Minnesota, can help itself out a decent amount by winning that game handily on what's essentially, I shouldn't even say essentially, definitely is a neutral field, literally the most neutral field possible. That line I think doesn't quite reflect that based on how bad New Orleans has looked lately, and a lot of that you give credit to Jameis for playing through the injury. It hasn't been pretty, man. He's kind of back to pre-LASIK Jameis these last couple weeks.
Yeah, he's been rough. That kind of steered me in the direction of Carolina last week, and yeah, like you said, like I could have believed Minnesota as slight favorites if this was on the road, but yeah, this is a neutral site game. I think that this one should be closer to like 3.5 or 4. So yeah, I do like this as I wouldn't call it a get right spot necessarily for Minnesota, but a game that they definitely should and need to win.
So my top 5 2-1 team, similar to yours, I got Buffalo, KC, Baltimore, Green Bay, Tampa Bay. We have the same 5 teams, just in slightly different order, so not much to discuss there. Trust me, I wanted to find a way to put Jacksonville in there. Can't quite do it. I think Tampa Bay's defense has been the best unit in the league. I don't really know if it's all that close so far, and I mean that alone has been enough to kind of upset what's been a pretty brutal start for that offense. But I trust that over the course of the year, that's going to come around once they get receivers back. And the other thing is, I mean, I'm really down on New Orleans. Atlanta's Atlanta. Carolina looks like one of the 3 worst teams in the league. Like Tampa Bay could go 10-7 and maybe still win that division. I don't think they're going to be under a ton of pressure in the NFC South unless something dramatically changes with the Saints. But I mean, Dallas is really interesting. They have, I think, a really good chance to end up going 3-0 without Dak Prescott. I think they were fortunate to run into the Bengals, who still are figuring things out on offense, and then of course you get a bad Giants team and what we think is a pretty bad Commanders team this weekend. The 2 cross-offs for me that were not considered at all are 2 teams that play each other, and
yes,
it's heaven forbid one of these teams is going to be 3-1. Maybe we should get a tie this week. Like I said last week that these are the 2 worst like 2-1 teams ever. One of these is going to be by far the worst 3-1 team that I can remember. And that's the Giants and the Bears. Both of these teams are very, very bad. Very bad.
Yes. Like, I don't think I really understood just how bad the Giants were, because like I basically, my exposure to the Giants before Monday night's debacle, for the most part, what was, their thrilling comeback against Tennessee. Didn't really catch much, if any, of their game against the Panthers. And, I think week 3 was a more clear depiction of who the Giants really are. You lose Sterling Shepard during the course of that game. So, that's going to make things worse for an already struggling passing game. So Mario Puig said it best on the RotoWire NFL pod on Thursday, where it's just like, as far as the Giants offense goes, like it's really just a question of, did Saquon have a good game or not? Because everything else just kind of feels like it would be a surprise if it was anything better than mediocre.
I think it says a lot that losing Sterling Shepard feels like to them losing Jamar Chase. I mean, that was like, oh my gosh, we've lost our 4th receiver. And, I mean, the depth chart is now Richie James and David Sills, because Wan'Dale Robinson, Kadarius Toney, they might just be perpetually questionable forever at this point. And
as far as we know,
Kenny Galladay is the most hated man in New York. I mean, that was embarrassing for him to say what he said and then come out and have that drop in that spot. I mean, I don't know if he really ever makes an impact for the Giants again. But yeah, man, Bears Giants is going to be, it's going to be a bloodbath for the eyes. That's for sure. There's a reason that's the lowest total of the week.
Yes, rightfully so. One more thing when it comes to Richie James, Middle Tennessee State having a bit of a moment right now. You got Richie James, star receiver for the New York Football Giants, and Middle Tennessee State whomping the University of Miami this past week. So the Blue Raiders, how about them?
That was a certified womp job. No question about that. Let's look ahead to week 4 now. And as we do every week, we'll do a little game of too high and a little game of too low. Give me some lines or some totals to you that are looking a little too high right now.
So this one, obviously, it's the highest one on the board, and with good reason. Once New England lost Mac Jones for this game, the line jumped pretty considerably. We're sitting at 9.5 right now. I'm looking to see if this will end up getting to 10 if enough money comes in on the Packers. If it's 10, then I'm really interested in the Patriots somehow, because I feel like that's the perfect situation where Bill Belichick comes up with the right game plan to just ugly this one up and keep it close with Brian Hoyer, or hopefully Bailey Zapp, the Zapper. But I don't think that's gonna happen, not this week. But once Brian Hoyer fails, maybe it will. But regardless, I don't think that the Packers are built to blow teams out. I don't think that the Patriots are going to score more than 13 points in this game. But I think the defense might just gunk things up for the Packers just enough to where that they stay within this. If we're talking about 10, 9.5, then it's hard to bet on the Patriots. But magic number being 10 there, I'm keeping an eye on that. And then Indianapolis, the 3.5 point favorites at home. That's pretty boilerplate. That's pretty standard. But I just think that Indianapolis is a bad team. I do think that Tennessee does have a coaching advantage against them. So yeah, they're both teams riding high after wins this past weekend, but I wouldn't trust Indianapolis with more than a field goal right now.
Yeah, that game is really difficult. That one feels like just a classic. We got to give a little bit of a nudge to the home team, but yeah, 3.5 might be a little high. I think that could easily be 2.5. If there was ever a spot though for Jonathan Taylor to get going, it would be against this Titans rush defense, allowing almost 6 yards per carry on the week. So I think there is an advantage there for Indianapolis. I mean, the question is, do you even trust them at this point? I mean, Matt Ryan has been pretty much a disaster, I think, relative to expectations. He's got 7 fumbles somehow. Hasn't lost all 7, but just fumbling the ball 7 times in 3 weeks is preposterous. He looks lost. That offense just looks like it just doesn't have an extra gear. And I mean, they are very, very lucky to not have picked up another loss and be sitting at 0-2-1 because the Chiefs did everything in their power to hand that game to the Colts.
Oh yeah, but once the Sky Moore muffed that punt, I was like, "Oh no, here we go!" Yep. Like you, myself, and Chris, and RotoWire soccer guy Chris Owen, we chat about football a good bit, and we're going over survivor strategy, and it's like, oh, the Chiefs are a good idea last week, and it's like, but what if Indianapolis, just because the NFL is weird, what if they not just cover but win? And yeah, lo and behold, it makes no sense, but it makes all the sense in the world.
That one hit like every possible hallmark, every checklist that you could have for a weird game where the clearly better team is going to lose. And like you said, it starts with a muffed punt right inside the 5-yard line on the first possession of the game. You're like, okay, check. Quarterback arguing with offensive coordinator at the end of the first half, check. Mm-hmm. Passing up on field goals to go for these bizarre 4th downs, fake field goals. Of course, to top it all off, too, you get the bizarre technical foul basically on Chris Jones late in the game for saying an unknown word to Matt Ryan. I mean, you almost never see that in the NFL. It's actually amazing the amount of leeway that players typically get. You have to really try to get an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty in the NFL. So, I mean, it had all the elements of a game like that. And of course, also adding in that the Colts were winless and essentially needed that game to get back on track. But to me, it was such an obvious spot. It's like, if you're the Chiefs, how do you let that happen? Like, if we're talking about it being an obvious letdown spot, the team has to be talking about it. I just don't understand how you, as the clearly better team with so many opportunities to win that game, it's amazing that it continues to happen every single year.
Right. It does, and the Chiefs, they are one of the best teams in football, but like they are certainly one of those teams that can play down to its competition and lay a stinker. Yeah. So I wish I had the not the foresight, because I could kind of see it coming, but the guts to actually put down on Indianapolis last week, and it cost me dearly.
Mm-hmm. So I'm with you on Green Bay. I think this is a 10-point game. Like you said, it's sitting at where are we at right now? 9.5. It was up as far as 10.5. I saw it at 11 at some other unnamed books, because we always use BetMGM. I wouldn't dare of placing a bet at a non-BetMGM book, but I know it was up there, and it's moving down. I think most people are kind of on the same train of thought as you, where Yeah, New England's probably not going to be able to do much offensively, but it's also not a game where you're expecting Green Bay to go and throw up 38 points. I mean, I think this ends up looking a lot like Green Bay, Chicago in week 2. And, Chicago came out, scored, I think, on the first or second drive. It never got out of hand. Definitely could have been a little bit closer, but Green Bay ends up winning that comfortably. I mean, I think this is a, 27-17, maybe 23-14 type of game. So I'm with you. If that gets to double digits, I think I would reverse course and take the New England side. Lines for me that are a little too high. I think Eagles -6.5. I mean, all the Jags hype going on right now. Do you really want to give that team 6.5 points?
Not really.
I respect the Eagles. I think the Jaguars do lose this game outright, but I also think, this is a Doug Peterson revenge game in a lot of ways against a team that essentially chose Carson Wentz over him. And I think we are going to see an ultra prepared, ultra aggressive offensive game from the Jaguars. Now, is that going to work? Could it backfire? It sure could. But I think we're going to see, going forward on 4th downs, trick plays, whatever the Jags need to do to come out and make a statement and compete in this game, I think they're going to do. And I don't know that they win it. If I had to pick straight up, I would pick the Eagles, but I think the Jags cover the 6.5.
I can certainly see it. They're playing really well. I mean, again, the Eagles probably the best team in the NFC, at least through the first 3 weeks of the season. But yeah, this is a cagey bunch for the Jags. One kind of game within the game matchup that I'm interested in is Darius Slay potentially against Christian Kirk. Because Kirk has been just phenomenal to start this season, and if he gets slowed down, can some of these like kind of secondary options in the Jaguars offense step up and kind of mitigate the loss if Christian Kirk is kind of not getting what we've grown accustomed to him getting through the first 3 weeks of the season. So that's a big one for me. But I think it definitely makes sense to be a little leery of just giving 6.5 points to this Jacksonville Jaguars team, especially with a Doug Peterson with revenge on his gigantic brain.
Yes, his now kind of salt and peppery, almost white-haired brain with, of course, the visor, I'm sure, will be out in Philly. I think the Jags can run on the Eagles. That to me is the key, because for as great as Trevor Lawrence is, I feel like he's getting all the attention. I mean, the Jags are pounding teams on the ground. It's been essentially just James Robinson. ETN, will make his appearances here and there. I think he's looked good, but Robinson himself has already ripped off 2 long touchdowns. He had the 4th down 50-yarder against the Chargers last week. I mean, that's really been the key for them is being multidimensional. 2 totals real quickly that I think are a little bit high. Chargers Texans to me. I mean, that one's sitting at 44 on BetMGM, and it's not that high, but the Chargers could not move the ball whatsoever on the Jags last week. They are by far the worst rushing team in the league. They've not been able to get Austin Eckler going whatsoever. Now, if there's ever a spot to do that, you would think it would be this week against the Texans. But Keenan Allen, I know I saw a note that he left practice on Thursday, walking with a trainer. I don't know if he's going to end up playing. We know about the other injuries for the Chargers, and we've already seen the Texans find a way to hang around with basically every team that they've played so far. And one of those teams was the Colts, who might not be good. One of those teams was the Bears last week, who is definitely not good. And the other one is the Broncos team that scored 3 touchdowns all year. So there is some context here, but I also think, it's early on. I don't know that the Chargers offense is what we thought it would be coming into the year. We might have to kind of erase that. So I don't really know. I don't think the Chargers get to 30 points here. I mean, obviously this could be, is it a 25-20 type of game that goes over? I don't know. I don't think the Chargers score a lot of points here. I also don't think the Texans score a lot of points. So I like the under on 44.
Yeah, I mean, I would be pretty surprised, even with the Bosa injury, if the Texans offense finds a way to score north of 20 points. And yeah, this Chargers offense, like I'm not convinced until we see otherwise that Justin Herbert is totally 100%. And then you take Keenan Allen out of the equation. That's someone who, when he's healthy, you can account 12, 14 targets to without really batting a lash. And Mike Williams doesn't see, like, I like Mike Williams as a talent, but he doesn't seem like he's built for like the number one role. Like, and Keenan Allen gets hurt so much that, you'd kind of think that Williams would kind of be a little bit more prepared to take on a bigger, share the workload, kind of bigger spotlight. And he just hasn't really done that yet. So, and their receiver depth beyond them is terrible. Like, Josh Palmer is not that good, first of all. And then, the way they used Austin Eckler thus far. I assume that this has to be a spot where he gets going. But yeah, there's a lot of problems with the Chargers right now. And this week, if they continue against the Texans, then I think you have to start having like those long-term concerns for them.
The other total for me that's a little high, Raiders-Broncos sitting at 45.5. The Raiders have looked fine offensively, good, not great. I mean, they've had so many drives that they should have finished off. I mean, Carr has, picks in the end zone and fumbles. It's just, they could have scored a lot more than they have, but the Broncos are the second lowest scoring team in the league right now, man. 43 points through 3 games. And I don't know if there was anything we saw last week against San Francisco that leads me to believe that anything's going to change there anytime soon. I mean, they got Jerry Jeudy back. I don't really know what else you're looking for. They still haven't really decided on the split between Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. So we know the Raiders could score, but the Broncos have had a fantastic defense so far. So I don't know that that's going to be the case. I think this is a 20-17 type of game. Could even be a 17-14 type of game. Like, unless you think the Broncos have a breakout of our shell game offensively, I'm not really sure I see this one getting into the high 40s.
No, I like that call a lot. The defense on both sides, like the pass rush is going to be super lively. And yeah, I mean, this Broncos offense, until we see otherwise, like we have to just kind of approach them as one of the worst in the league right now. And I don't know if it's the play calling. It doesn't feel like it's a talent problem. So I don't know what else it could be right now. But either way, they're that they're not lighting up the scoreboard.
All right, hit me with a couple lines or a couple totals that are a little too low for you this week.
So I know I was just speaking on the Chargers being, having all these problems, but if the Chargers do show up here, then they will cover 5 easily, in my opinion. And then another one that I think is too low. This one's kind of gross. This is the Cleveland Browns, only -1 on the road against the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons coming back from their West Coast swing. I think the Browns are the exact team that will beat every team that's worse than them. They're not going to beat teams that are a weight class or 2 higher than them, at least not with Jacoby Brissett. But the rest of the team is just, they're solid. I liked their game plan against Pittsburgh for the most part. I think that they are able to kind of take care of business in sort of boring Brownsy fashion. So, not total. Well, their game against the Panthers was actually kind of exciting. I think this one will be more boring and more kind of just decided that the Browns are the victors here. So I think that they should be favored by closer to 2.5.
Well, they were a few days ago. That's what's kind of scaring me. Is this line was at 3, and then it was at 2.5, and then 1.5, and then 1, then back up to 1.5, and now, like you said, it's sitting at Browns -1 at BetMGM. And yeah, I mean, I came away pretty convinced, pretty impressed with the Browns overall in that game against the Steelers. And that's the other thing. They last played on Thursday. They're getting 3 extra prep days here to prepare for Atlanta. And to me, I think this should be probably closer to 2.5. It scares me that it's not. It's a kind of what am I missing type of situation. Mm-hmm. I do think the Browns take care of business here. But, I mean, the Falcons are one of those teams, like, just by virtue of having a mobile quarterback, it adds this element of unpredictability that I think is tough to prepare for. But I think we're in agreement that Seattle is not a great team, right? And it took pretty much everything Atlanta had to take care of Seattle. I think Cleveland more well-rounded. The only thing for me is we'll see about Myles Garrett and we'll see about Jadeveon Clowney. If those guys don't play, maybe that changes things.
Sure. No, that would be huge, because the rest of that Browns defense, like, it needs the front 7 and needs the pass rush to be working for it all to kind of come together. So that's definitely important. But I think that there could be, if those injuries are the things that are fueling the line movement, then I think it's a slight bit of an overreaction.
Okay, fair enough. I have the Vikings -2.5. I think that's too small. I think, again, this feels like that's what the line would be if it was in New Orleans. And obviously, if it was in New Orleans, it would probably be tilted even more in favor of the Saints. But I think the Vikings are the better team. In some ways, it was kind of this ugly win over Detroit where you come out almost feeling worse about Minnesota despite them winning the game. And they have not shown nearly that gear offensively since week 1 against the Packers, where we thought, is Justin Jefferson going to, go for 1,900 yards and 20 touchdowns this year?
Triple crown.
Yeah, right. In the last 2 weeks, it's kind of come back down to earth. But I think the Vikings at this point are the better coach team. I think they have the more reliable quarterback by default because Jameis has just been so erratic the last couple of weeks. It sounds like Dalvin Cook is going to play on Sunday morning. I think that's huge. We still don't know about a bunch of the key Saints players, and it's just weird vibes, man, with the Saints. They've had some games that it should not have come to what it did, in week one. Week two, pretty ugly loss against Tampa Bay. Can't really move the ball at all. Had some ugly turnovers there. And then I am very down on the Panthers. I do not think the Panthers are a good team. They put up almost no fight down in Carolina in week 3. And now it's a lot to ask to fly all the way to London. You got a bunch of guys banged up and have to play a pretty good Vikings team. So I think that line could easily be Vikings 3, Vikings 3.5, maybe all the way up to 4. I like the Vikings quite a bit straight up.
Yeah, Aaron Brooks isn't walking through that door for the Saints.
Absolutely not. Neither is Joe Horn. Neither is Dante Stallworth. I'll tell you that.
Where are they?
I have one that I want to ask you about. I don't know if it's too low. I just want to put some feelers out. And part of this is just how bad one team has looked. It's not like I feel great about the other, but should the Cowboys be favored by more than 3 at home against the Commanders?
Honestly, yeah. I think that Carson Wentz, what we saw from him through the first game and then parts of the second game in Detroit, it's like, okay, well, maybe this offense, the talent around him is going to be enough to drag Carson Wentz up to competency. I don't think that's going to be the case this week. I think that Dallas pass rush is like the best in the league. I think they have like 13 sacks or something so far.
24 pressures on Monday night.
Crazy. I mean, that's reminiscent of the AFC Championship game with the Peyton Manning Broncos against the Patriots, where Brady got hit like 18 times in that game. That's crazy. You don't see that too often. And I think that you also have the fact that Washington, I think, turns the ball over a good bit. So, I think a case could definitely be made, even with the backup quarterback for Dallas being in there, that the Cowboys are still that much better than the Commanders right now.
So I hate to say this, John, you lost your best bet last week. As you outlined at the top of the show, you had 49ers to win and cover 1.5. That did not happen. I did win mine. I took the Bengals -6. They took care of business against the Jets, which means for the first time this year, John, you got to read the read.
I got to read the read, folks. I just grabbed a sip of water, so We're doing good. Doing some vocal exercises. Me. All right, here we go. Kick off the new pro football season with the king of sportsbooks. Sign up with BetMGM using bonus code BETROTO. That's BETROTO. And your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions.
All right, good start. That's a hot start.
All right, here we go. All right, we're naming states here. Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, Tennessee, Virginia, Washington, D.C., West Virginia, Wyoming, or Ontario only. Must be 21 years or older to wager, 19 or older in Ontario. Sorry about pronouncing Ontario, thinking about Ontario Smith. New customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable free bets or site credit. Free bets expire 7 days from issuance. Excludes Michigan disassociated persons. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, D.C., Kansas, Louisiana, Nevada, Wyoming, or Virginia. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. 1-800-GAMBLER in Indiana, Maryland, New Jersey, or West Virginia. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Call or text the Tennessee Red Line at 800-889-9789 in Tennessee, or call 1-888-777-9696 in Mississippi. In Ontario, if you have questions or concerns about your gambling or someone close to you, please contact Connects Ontario at 1-866-531-2600 to speak to an advisor free of charge. Sports betting is void in Georgia, Hawaii, Ohio, and Utah, and other states where prohibited. Promotional offers not available in Nevada or New York.
Well done. That was an absolute clinic.
Felt good. Oddly enough, ad copy. I guess we both been in the game long enough. We both been doing pods. I used to be on the XM show. I know all about these ad reads. So, it felt good. Felt good off the club there. It was okay to be able to take that off your plate this week. And again, it's the carrot and the stick for trying to get my best bet right for this week. So I don't have to do it every single week, despite the fact that it's beautiful, beautiful ad pros.
Yeah, I love that. I used to be on the XM show, just very vague, after the incident.
I don't think they kicked me off, but it was a soft let go. It's like, I'm moving to Atlanta, and they're like, you know what? We're not sending radio equipment with you. And I'm like, sounds good, guys.
I mean, shipping costs are out of control these days.
Oh, back the summer of 21.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love, so like midway through the read, you hit that excludes Michigan disassociated persons. Please gamble responsibly. You would think it's over at that point, right? Psych. No, you're only like 60% of the way through.
And you got hundreds of more numbers to read.
Yeah. I need more information. Like the 1-800 bets off, the 1-800 gambler. Like, yeah, that all makes sense. Like 1-800-981-0023. Like, was that the catchiest number available?
That I don't know what what the creative room was coming up with their phone number for said hotlines. But yeah, I tend to prefer the just spelled out word. Although sometimes when I'm doing that, I just kind of forget where the letters are on relative to the numbers on the phone. It kind of trips me up. That's how connected I am to my old smartphone now. It's just not the same as the flip phone texting.
Yeah, I've been looking into getting like a rotary attachment for my iPhone to see if I could do something.
carry that sucker around.
Yeah, it plugs into the mini USB. By the way, so we're not judging anybody here, but I looked up what is a Michigan disassociated person, and it appears to be somebody that you can like put yourself on a list that essentially makes it illegal for you to go to a casino. I think, if I'm reading this correctly. So it's voluntary. You can only put yourself on the list. And if you're on the list and you're caught at a casino, or you like win money at a casino, you could be fined, or I believe even arrested. So I think it's just kind of a way to control problem gambling.
Okay. All right. So those guys, don't be betting. Don't do it.
Yeah. I need to put myself on a list for purchasing Hams Light. Like Wisconsin disassociated persons.
Lock me up. Thought about hams again.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Back to week 4. I got a question for you. How many teams right now are we sure? We're very sure are bad. I have my list, but how many teams are on your list?
Okay, so I don't want to steal your thunder too much, but I think of like the fringe ones, the ones that maybe we'll know for sure at the end of this weekend. I think that the Cardinals and Washington, and then whomever loses Tennessee versus Indiana, I think that we can put them in the bad bucket. But please, if you will, let the listeners know who the really bad teams are.
First of all, love that you said Tennessee versus Indiana. As an NBA guy, I'm constantly saying like the Indianapolis Pacers or the Indiana Colts. So
that's what my dad problem, because my dad's Baltimore guy. I obviously love the Baltimore Colts. So he will not refer to them as the Colts, and he does not even call them he just calls them Indiana. And I just kind of have to cipher out what that means. And it literally just bled into into this broadcast. That's deep in my neural cortexes.
Yeah, that blue team to the west. So I have a list of 6 teams that I'm sure are bad. It's the Jets, the Giants, the Bears, the Texans, the Panthers, and the Seahawks.
Yes, there are none of them that I would say, no, those guys are good. It's even on some of their best case scenarios, you could only see them being like a 5-win team. So yeah, I think that's pretty much who we know right now is indeed bad.
So on the borderline for me, the Cardinals, maybe. They've found ways to stick around. They've been bizarre ways. I mean, they had that insane comeback against Vegas. They got, wiped in week 1 by KC. Kind of hung around with the Rams, but part of that was, some weird mistakes by the Rams, who just do everything they can to make every win as difficult as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And, throwing the ball, like Matthew Stafford throwing like 100-mile-per-hour slants from the 1-yard line instead of just, running the ball in that situation against bad Cardinals defense. They had Cam Akers fumble on the 1-yard line late in that game that robbed them of another touchdown. But I think the Cardinals are borderline bad. However, I think Kyler Murray is very good. So it's hard to be a truly bad team when you have a good quarterback. Washington, to me, very questionable at this point. There's a world in which that win over the Jags in week 1, we're going to look back on that like the Jags beating the Bills last year. And
yeah.
How the hell did that happen? Because Washington, since that game, has been horrendous. The offensive line has been a complete joke. They basically played like a half of a good quarter over their last 2 games and have just gotten dominated the rest of it. So they're close. If they get beat by Dallas convincingly, I think they could be in the bad zone. And then the loser of Tennessee in the words of your dad, Indiana this weekend, I think is in danger of getting tossed into the bad bin as well. But let's get back to the week 4 slate and just kind of go and hit some of the games that we haven't quite yet. I mentioned I like the Saints, to cover, or excuse me, I like the Saints. I like the Vikings to beat the Saints in London, cover that 2.5. Let's talk about that Tennessee-Indianapolis game. It's Derrick Henry versus Jonathan Taylor. I'm leaning Indianapolis just because they're the home team. If this game was in Tennessee, I would lean the other way. I have no idea if either of these teams are competent. Like we just said, I think the loser is in serious trouble here. I'm with you that I think Tennessee is the better coach team, but for some reason, I think Indianapolis wins this game.
Coming into the season, I would have been certainly on Indianapolis, but the way that they've played through the first 3 weeks, and that, yes, that includes their win over Kansas City, they're just not trustworthy. I think that it's an offense that needs Jonathan Taylor to be running at absolute full capacity for really anything else to work. I feel like I think you brought up a good point about Matt Ryan. The ball security has really been an issue. That could be a problem against this Tennessee pass rush. And they just, outside of Michael Pittman, there's just, I don't know how they entered this season with like this collection of pass catchers. Like that, they're relatively deep at tight end, but their receivers beyond Michael Pittman are kind of an embarrassment. And I'm saying that as someone who pulls for the Baltimore Ravens. So that's crazy to me. Tennessee, a team that I thought was fraudulent coming into the year, a team that I felt was one of the easier ones to circle as playoff teams from 2021 who will not be in the postseason this year. And I still feel that way. But I just think that last week was a big test to me that they passed, in the sense that they were able to get off the ropes and get a win over, yes, an 0-3 now Raiders team. But I don't think the Raiders are terrible by any stretch, not as bad as their record might suggest. So I think that Tennessee comes in here and they just keep this one close enough to where I don't feel like Indiana wins by more than a field goal if they do end up getting the win. So I think that there's just enough there at Tennessee to get it done.
Okay, yeah, this could feel like a home team wins, road team covers situation. I can get on that for sure. Let's talk Ravens Bills. We've somehow avoided, I think, what's probably the game of the week. We got the 2 lowest MVP odds over at BetMGM right now, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. I think, to me, Josh Allen has the better odds or the lower odds, but I think Lamar has been more valuable thus far. I mean, we had a guest on the XM show, Tom Kesnick, last night, say that Lamar Jackson would be the number 1 fantasy running back this season if you just take his rushing production. I mean, he's been unbelievable, and it feels like he's had a better year through the air than he has on the ground so far. So, right now we're looking at what, Bills -3 in this game. It's pretty much been in that zone the entire week. What's your lean here?
I thought it might have come down from 4 even. So there is a little bit of movement towards Baltimore. I just feel like last week, despite Baltimore getting the win in New England, and maybe this just kind of has to be the new normal for Baltimore, where they're just going to have to outscore everybody. But that defense, it's not fixed. The new defensive coordinator, I don't know what he has these guys doing as far as their run fits go, but they were giving up tons of chunk yardage to New England on the ground. Of course, it's not as big of an issue when you're talking about Buffalo, because they're not super interested in running the ball, whether it's Singletary or Moss or James Cook. Really, their run game is uber dependent on Josh Allen a lot of the time. But my fear my thought really when it comes to Baltimore in this setup is they don't want a ton of Josh Allen dropbacks, and I think that's what they're going to get. And when you have a guy like Josh Allen, it's just like, it's sort of like vintage Roethlisberger in the sense of his ability to escape you in the pocket, or if you do get to him, it doesn't matter. He still gets the throw off. So this is a bad pass rush that Baltimore has, and we're going to see a lot of Josh Allen operating in clean pockets, having a lot of time. And then when you give time to guys like Stephon Diggs or Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, the list goes on. I think that we're going to start to see, a bunch of Buffalo Bills running open down the field, and that's going to end up being a problem for Baltimore. So I think this one ends up being a back and forth one because, I will say this is as good as Lamar has looked since his MVP season. So I don't think that that's going away in this game. I know Buffalo has defended him well in the past, that playoff game and everything like that, but I just feel like the Bills are better built. They're a better team overall. I think they do find a way to win this one, and probably by more than a field goal. So I like them at -3, but I think this probably ends up being the highest scoring game of the weekend.
Well, it's the only game that currently has a total higher than 48.5. It's at 51. So obviously the only game over 50 as well. So the odds makers over at BetMGM agree with you there. The one thing that gives me a little bit of pause just about this game in general and the total is that we're likely going to have pretty decent precipitation in the Baltimore area. Residual effects of Hurricane Ian working its way up the seaboard. I was kind of trying to debate to myself earlier today, like if it's raining, let's just say it's a nice steady rain throughout the game. Does that help or hurt either team more than the other? Like for some reason, I feel like both these teams, you kind of think of Baltimore as being a team that could succeed in that type of environment, but I don't think it's necessarily a hindrance for Buffalo either.
I think it could. Yeah. Well, if Buffalo has to run it more, I guess if Josh Allen wasn't such like a freak where like weather doesn't seem to like apply to him,
right.
then you could see it being a bigger deal for Buffalo. But if it does get nasty up there to where it does affect the throw game, and all of a sudden Buffalo has to kind of reconfigure his whole offense, then I think that does ultimately hurt Buffalo more than it does Baltimore. Baltimore needs to get its run game going, of course, but this will be J.K. Dobbins' second game back on a mucky track that is kind of a concern for a guy that this far removed from his return from injury, with it being so recent. So there's a little concern there, but if it just turns into when you bring up really rainy games in Baltimore, I'm reminded of that game against San Francisco a couple of years ago in 2019 that was between two of the best teams in the NFL that November, and it was just a total slog, but the Ravens kind of had the right offensive game plan to eke out the win in that one. So if the weather is really, really nasty in Charm City, maybe the Ravens are the play.
All right, I got two more somewhat premier games that I want to hit, and then we'll go rapid fire through just I don't even know what the right word is for games like Jets Steelers and Bears Giants. I can assure you we will not be spending more than a minute on each of those games, but we got to talk Chiefs Bucks and we got to talk Rams 49ers. We'll start with Chiefs Buccaneers. I was on the Chiefs earlier this week. I took them in my picks column. I'm standing by it. At that time, I thought there was a decent chance that this game would be played in Minneapolis. Obviously, that would help the road team in this scenario, going from a true road game to a neutral site, but it will be played in Tampa. Thankfully, in a lot of ways, there wasn't as much damage as maybe they anticipated in that area. So that's great. But if you're the Chiefs, like obviously you'd rather play this game closer to home in Minneapolis and without a home field advantage for Tampa. We have no idea which receivers are going to be available for the Buccaneers. We likely won't find out until Sunday morning, maybe even into the early afternoon. That scares me for sure. Just the way that this Buccaneers offense has looked in general scares me, but it also feels like we haven't seen it anywhere near full strength. So I'm kind of nervous to say that the Buccaneers offense isn't as good as it's been in years past, because I feel like once we get a full game with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Julio Jones together, I think it's going to look a heck of a lot different than it has through 3 weeks. But I think in some ways the Chiefs losing to Indianapolis is bad for the Buccaneers, because I feel like you're coming into this game laser focused. You're upset. You're stewing on what happened last week. You're making sure it doesn't happen again. And this is certainly a losable game for Kansas City. They are in fact underdogs. It's Tampa Bay -1. That shifted considerably once we found out the game would be played in Tampa. But this becomes a really difficult evaluation now.
Yeah, it absolutely does. You have great on great in the sense of Chiefs offense versus this Buccaneers defense that, like you said at the top of the show, best in the league. And they are going to be at home now. That helps things, of course, on the Tampa Bay side. So yeah, this is really a tricky one. I still think that it's tough. I mean, I still, in my heart of hearts, believe that the Chiefs find a way, and they just kind of keep the Buccaneers offense grounded for yet another week, and then the Chiefs offense on the other side finds a way to find a crack or two in that Bucs defense. The only time they've really done that was when they had Tyreek Hill, and Tyreek Hill like completely went off on them in that one first half. But we've seen plenty of history between these teams since, and the Chiefs have kind of had the Buccaneers and this defense be their kryptonite a little bit. But I think it changes this week. I think that the Chiefs kind of get themselves reestablished. They come off of the loss that they really should have avoided last week, like you mentioned, and get it right here. So I do still like the road team in this one in the Chiefs.
I think that's the way I'll end up going. When I do lock things in prior to kickoff, I just, like you said, it makes me feel better that the Chiefs lost last week. I think they come in and basically just don't mess around in a lot of the ways that they hurt themselves last week against Indianapolis. I mean, you're certainly not going to be able to get away with that against this Tampa Bay defense. But a little bit concerning, too, that the Chiefs have not really established a number one receiver. I kind of thought going into the year that could be a good thing. If you have four guys who you're equally worried about. But to me, it's kind of been the reverse of that, where none of those guys really seem all that effective or all that dependable, of course, outside of Kelsey.
Right. And, you did a RotoWire online championship draft. I did as well. And Sky Moore was like a 9th round pick or something in that one. I mean, yeah, I'm not trying to pick shame here. And I certainly had some picks that I regretted from that one. But, it definitely hurts to have like an obviously cuttable guy that you drafted in the top 10 or top 10 rounds at just 3 weeks into the season. But that's kind of where it is with Sky Moore, someone that they took in the first round. And, with the door kind of being open with all these targets kind of up for grabs between MVS, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman, and then you add Sky Moore in. And yeah, he obviously didn't take advantage of it. So yeah, it's really Kelsey or who knows as far as this passing game rotation goes.
All right, let's talk 49ers Rams. This one out at the Big Bell Bottom in Santa Clara. I like the Rams here. I know that the Niners are favored -1.5. I'm trying not to read too much into just how horrific that offense was last week. They did not score on 11 of their final 12 drives after putting in a touchdown on, I believe, their second drive of the game. Great drive. I was feeling great. I took the 49ers. You locked them up. I thought you were going to be in good shape. And man, that was a extremely unimpressive game from Jimmy G. I thought it was extremely unimaginative play calling, from Kyle Shanahan. I mean, great job. Hats off to both defenses, I suppose. But to me, it just felt like a bad offense game. I mean, all 12 of those drives, even the one that the 49ers got a field goal on later in the half, every single one of those last 12 drives went for 5 plays or fewer. I mean, there was just nothing happening whatsoever offensively for the 49ers. And I think Denver does have a really good defense. That's part of it. And, the Rams have been a little bit shaky, but to me, for as shaky as the Rams have been, I think a lot of their mistakes have been somewhat self-inflicted. And I know they're on the road, and I know Shanahan has kind of owned McVay other than the playoffs last year. But I just feel like right at this moment, the Rams are the better team.
They probably are, but I think the self-inflicted element, like that doesn't go away for me. And, let's see, over the last going back to 2018, I've put this down in my article. Yeah, San Francisco 6-3 against the spread. Like you said, the playoff game last year went the other way, but I do like San Francisco in this one. I think the Rams, just even if they play a good 30 minutes of football in the first half type of thing, they just don't feel like a complete team that's finishing with really much emphasis, and they seem to be letting teams linger around, teams that are much worse than the 49ers. And I don't think that they can afford to do that. And I think, Jimmy G makes his first start of the season. He's obviously a seasoned starter at this point, but makes his first start on national TV last week, gets those jitters out. He returns back home, like you said, to the big bell bottom. I think this goes the 49ers. I don't love backing either of these teams in this spot, but I think I do, oddly enough, have a little bit more questions about this Rams team and just kind of their general makeup and what do they really have that's established as good right now, other than Cooper Kupp and the Matthew Stafford connection.
I will say that's been about it, and they did kind of get Cam Akers going last week, but at the same time, it was still uninspiring. Still had that costly fumble. They don't really seem like they know what they're doing as far as that running back split goes. And I don't even think Stafford's been that good. I think he's missed a ton of throws. He's still making weird mistakes. He's got more interceptions than touchdowns at this point. And they're one of those offenses that, like I said earlier, they overcomplicate the little things. I don't understand, some of the decisions that come from, a guy who's one of the consensus best coaches in the league. So yeah, this one to me, probably a stay away, I guess, if we're this split on it. Like if I'm so sure that the Rams are winning and you're so sure that the Niners are winning, maybe that tells us something. But let's go rapid fire through the bad games this week, and then we'll get out of here. Right. Bears Giants. You got any leans there?
I got the Giants just because it's the Bears.
Well, the Giants had some key injuries. I was not impressed. I didn't think they looked a whole lot better than the Bears against Dallas the other night. But it was also tough to evaluate, with how much Daniel Jones was under siege really since the moment that game began. I'm going to bet, or go ahead.
Were you a Manning cast guy on Monday night?
I was not. I was doing the radio show during the game, and you kind of got to just clue in on the traditional broadcast there because I can't watch with the sound.
Right. No, exactly. But Tracy Morgan did go on, I think, in the third or fourth quarter. He bought himself 3 Ferraris for his birthday. So,
oh, really?
Pretty
Same
good.
Here. Oh, nice. Okay, cool.
Mine are just Hot Wheels. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It says the driver of a 2018 Chevy Malibu. Jets Steelers. I like the Steelers here a lot. I think this is not a trap game for Zach Wilson. I just feel like every game's a trap game for him at this point. But I just think this is the Steelers defense is a little different without TJ Watt. But not only is it this week, but like look at the Jets schedule these next few weeks. Like this is what you're bringing Zach Wilson back into: Steelers, Dolphins, Packers, Broncos, Patriots, Bills, Patriots. I mean, those are the next 7 games for the Jets. There is not a single below average defense in the mix.
No, that's a dang wood chipper. That's going to be tough. I would not want to, or I do not envy him nor their offensive line over these next 2 months here. I do like the Steelers as well. Like at some point, the Steelers will kind of make me not bet on them, but basically against a team like the Jets, even with all the flaws that the Steelers have, I don't think that the Jets are the ones to like make them pay for it. So Steelers at home, coming off the loss, they've been able to stew on it for a little bit longer. So I like Pittsburgh too.
All right, we saved the best for last. Cardinals, Panthers. Panthers 2-point favorites at BetMGM. They are the home team.
I got the Panthers, and it's really not because of any real faith in the Panthers, and McCaffrey's been missing practice time, so we'll see what's up with him. But I am that out on the Cardinals. I just think that they will find ways to lose, and they've got banged up receiver personnel. They're still missing DeAndre Hopkins. The backfield is a little bit messy right now, and I think the defense is a mess as well. So I just feel like Carolina is just a team that's not going to make quite as many mistakes. I know we can laugh at that with Baker Mayfield being their quarterback, but I just don't feel like the Panthers are going to screw it up the way that I do think the Cardinals will.
If I had to make a worst bet of the week, it would be this game. Maybe we should start doing that. A best bet.
Yeah.
This is the game that I feel the least confident about. It's one that if it was in Arizona, I'd say, yeah, I'd probably like the Cardinals. Like in general, I try to side with the better quarterback. And I do think that's the one thing that separates these two teams, which have been, they both have injury issues. They're both sloppy. They're both probably not good at the end of the day, but one team has the much better quarterback than the other. So that does make me want to lean Cardinals. But this line has moved at least a half point in the last 24 hours in favor of Carolina. So you never know. BetMGM might have an in on this one. Complete stay away for me. I would not advise betting this game whatsoever.
No, that's you really don't know what you're getting from either side in this one, and then the Cardinals have to go very far to get to Charlotte.
Yeah, if you're betting that game, that's disassociated person behavior. All right, you're just don't even think about it. All right, real quickly, let's do our Survivor picks and fades. We'll offer up our locks, and then we'll get out of here.
All right, so my fades would be the Chargers. They are at 11% over at one of the websites that hosts Survivor. Detroit would be one. I know Seattle's bad, but I'm not sure that I'm backing with a Survivor pick this Detroit team that is really banged up, especially at key spots. Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Swift. Steelers, again, we were just running through why the Steelers are going to win and cover, but Survivor is a different discussion, and you're talking about Mitchell Trubisky, so I'm out there. So I think that Green Bay is probably the one for this week. That feels like the layup, but I've already used them in my Survivor pool. So I kind of think Dallas is an interesting one.
I don't hate that. I don't hate that at all. That's one where, like in my Pick'em league, I went like Dallas 4, and I've just like bumped them up and up and up and up as I keep revisiting it and retinkering throughout the week. And I think I have them up to like 12 or 13 now. So yeah, in terms of my confidence in the Cowboys just winning that game straight up, I like that call a lot. If you want to go contrarian, like you said, Packers are going to be super popular. I mean, that might be over 50% by the time we get to kickoff on Sunday. I would fade the Eagles. I would fade the Cardinals. Not that anybody's jumping on the Cardinals this week, but I saw they were at like 2 or 3% on one of the sites that tracks Survivor picks. Steelers, to me, like I said, I think that's a really bad spot for the Jets. So if you don't want to go Packers, you want to save the Packers. I know, for example, the Circa Survivor contest counts Christmas as its own week. So you need to make sure that you have a team that's playing on Christmas available. And I know the Packers are one of those teams. The Vikings, of course, too, are another favorite of mine this week. It is time now for our locks of the week, John. You do not want to have to do that read again next week, and neither do I. So hopefully I can get some momentum here. Give me your lock of the week against the spread.
All right, here it is. Without any further ado, Cleveland Browns -1 against the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Browns are rock solid. I don't think that they're particularly good, but I think they're rock solid. I think the Falcons are prone to making a lot of mistakes. I think that Marcus Mariota, fun for fantasy, but I think also he's someone that I think can make some really costly turnovers. And I think that the overall talent advantage is pretty decidedly on Cleveland's side here. So give me Cleveland giving 1 point to Atlanta on the road.
Okay, I like it. I'm going Minnesota. I'm riding with it. Again, I feel like this line is just giving the Saints a little too much respect, especially in a neutral site game, especially with New Orleans being the team that has all these injuries, that has to fly across the world, not even across the country, across the entire world, and deal with all that this week. I don't have faith in their coach. I don't have faith in their offense. I think this is a really, really good spot for Minnesota to have a nice chance to build on that come-from-behind win. Really two different come-from-behind wins within the same game. I mean, they trailed by double digits 2 separate times against Detroit last week and rallied back. So I like Minnesota, -2.5. You like the Browns, -1. So we will track those. We'll see how it goes. We'll revisit next week. That's going to wrap up the NFL Week 4 version of the podcast. But we're going to be talking some college football. So stick around if you're watching on YouTube. This will, of course, be in our RotoWire College Football podcast feed as well. Jan, the floor is yours. What's the board looking like in Week 5 of the college football season? Almost said Week 4. Got to remember, college is a week ahead. Obviously, I don't even want to touch on what happened in Columbus last Saturday. We're just going to move right past that and talk Week 5.
Yeah, I barely want to talk about what happened in Athens. And actually, hand up, I didn't watch a single second of the Georgia game. I willingly watched more Auburn, Missouri than I did Georgia last weekend. And Kent State hung around, but I think that a lot of the dogs were a little bit hungover for that one. The noon kickoff,
dogs
everything like that. Yeah, their dogs were barking. Not great, but I think they'll get back on track this weekend against Missouri. But my favorite games for this weekend, or my favorite bets, more specifically, you got Utah facing off against Oregon State. Utah -10.5 at home. I think Utah closer to a 2 touchdown victory in this one. Oregon State's a lot of fun, but they're missing some key players. They've showed to be a little bit turnover prone, although USC is turning everybody over. So like that's a fair critique. But Utah, that's a defense that is known for being able to do that sort of thing as well. I like Kentucky. This line has bounced around a lot. It's gone towards towards Mississippi a good bit. Lane calling out the student section. Got to imagine that they're going to be rocking in the Grove and then at Vaught Hemingway Stadium as well. But I like Kentucky to hang within a touchdown here. And, if you're confident there, then maybe you could even sprinkle a little bit on the Kentucky money line as well. It wouldn't completely shock me if they go in there and beat Ole Miss. If they slow Ole Miss's ground game down and you have Jackson Dart having to win, he hasn't really shown that he can do that by himself just yet, at least passing. I think this is a great time to get Oklahoma, only giving 6.5 against TCU. Just buy right back in. Like last week, that I don't know why Kansas State was built specifically in a lab to beat Oklahoma once in a while. But I don't understand it, but that's just kind of the way of the world. But this week, Oklahoma, I think, takes care of business pretty handily against TCU. I think UCLA Washington is really interesting. Obviously, Bill Connelly, everyone looks at his spread picks or spread projections based off of SP+, and Washington is favored in this one at sports books, but Billy C has UCLA winning this one outright by a decent margin there. So there's like a 9-point differential between his projection and where the Washington line is. So that's really interesting. It kind of makes me wonder if UCLA is the side to go with there. Maybe Washington's been overperforming a little bit thus far this season. And then Washington State versus Cal under the 53. I think that these are just too often. I know that Wazoo, played a really exciting, fun game this past weekend against Oregon. I think this one becomes a little bit more of a defensive struggle, and I don't think that Cal can score a lot of points either. So I think that one ends up with a total points scored, closer to 50 or 48. So 53 is a pretty decent cushion, in my opinion. And then some fun kind of under the radars. Georgia Southern +10 at Coastal. Coastal, they've had some backfield injuries. They looked really good against Georgia State last week, but Southern has been a lot of fun. They are really tricky to play against. Really max tempo, tons of passes. So Coastal, they're going to need their offense to sustain some drives, keep Southern on the sidelines. Otherwise, that one gets pretty interesting. And then Tulsa +9 against Cincinnati. I thought Cincinnati looked great last week against Indiana, but there's something about this Tulsa team. Maybe I'm conflating fun with good a little bit too much, but Tulsa being at home, that Davis Brin, Keelan Stokes, Juan Carlos Santana. There's a guy named Juan Carlos Santana. All one word for Juan Carlos. It's phenomenal. So they got some dudes and they got some guys, and I think that Tulsa at the very least, they are appointment second game or team that you have on your second TV. They need to be at least in your remotes rotation. They like to have fun there.
Well said. And I want to talk Heisman with you as well, because when we saw CJ Stroud dice up a certain Big Ten opponent, Bryce Young, obviously, those are the two guys that we thought would be competing this entire season. Stetson Bennett kind of working his way into the mix. As long as the Dogs keep winning, he's going to be there. Caleb Williams obviously having a great year at USC as well, but how do you see that race shaping up? Is there anyone else we should be keeping an eye
on? With Bryce Young has a good chance to kind of maybe not fully leapfrog this weekend, but kind of remind everyone who he is. With that road game at Arkansas, they're 17-point favorites in that one. If Bryce Young just goes in there and quiets Hog Nation, then things are definitely looking good. That's another notch in his Heisman repeat case. But the reason why I bet on Hendon Hooker at +6,000 over the summer is that he had tons of potential Heisman moments all laid out in front of him going into this season. Whether it was the tough non-con game against Pitt or such an exciting game last weekend against Florida for Tennessee to come out on top there. That was thrilling. They have a game in Athens a little bit later on this season. That's another potential opportunity. If Tennessee pulls off the victory, then I think Hendon Hooker's at least in the top 3, and or he vaults himself into the top 3 right there. Could end up being a finalist, and it wouldn't be that crazy for him to win the award if he keeps going the way that he is. So yeah, Hendon Hooker again plus 6,000 to open the year. Now he's at like plus 1,800, and then shout out to one Jalen Daniels, quarterback. Your Kansas Jayhawks, my Kansas Jayhawks, America's Kansas Jayhawks.
Mark Mangino's Kansas Jayhawks.
Rock chalk, man. They're something else. That they're playing Iowa State this weekend. Keep an eye on that one. So I think it's an amazing sentence in the year of our Lord 2022 to say that Kansas has someone in the top 10 in the Heisman finalist odds.
What a rise for Lance Leopold, by the way. The old Whitewater coach, working his way up. I know he's been in the mix for potentially the Nebraska job as well. But yeah, climbing the ladder. Good to see a Wisconsin guy.
He's like the new poster boy for like message board people. Like every fan base's message board that's looking for a coach is like, what about Leopold? Like even ones that have coaches with reasonable security. It's like, yeah, he's fine, but what about Lance Leopold though? He's officially taken that mantle. Yeah, I mean, it's basically the same exact vibes as like Matt Campbell was getting a couple of years ago.
All right, man. Looking forward to week 5. I will be in Madison for Illinois, Wisconsin. Mercifully, I will not be going to the game, but doing a little reuniting with the fellas. Going to tailgate, going to hang around town, hopefully behave ourselves. We'll see how everything goes. But I still think people are going to find a way to have fun. I mean, Wisconsin's only favored by 7 at home against Illinois. That kind of tells you where things are at. The total for that game is 43.5, only a 1.5 higher than Michigan, Iowa. But yeah, it's not quite the season that we thought it might be for Wisconsin, but nonetheless, we will persevere.
Yeah, at the very least, you can always trust Badger fans to have a good time, especially if the game's in Madison. So that'll be fun. I expect if you make it to Paul's Club, I need to see a picture of the tree.
Yeah, I think if we go to Paul's Club and don't whip out a chainsaw and cut down the tree, that'll be a successful weekend.
You stole the turnover chainsaw from Oregon State, undisclosed trip out there, and then yes, use it to cut down the famous tree in Paul's Club, as is tradition.
All right, man. Go Dogs, go Badgers. Best of luck with all your picks this weekend. I'm going to wish myself good luck as well. I certainly need it, but we'll be back. We'll be previewing week 5 in the NFL this time next week.